The evidence is clear. Russia plans to invade Ukraine. The warning from Boris Johnson. As Russia continues war games on Ukraine's border, diplomatic efforts are redoubled. The Prime Minister has talks with the US President.
This is a very, very dangerous, difficult situation. We are on the edge of a precipice, but there is still time for President Putin to step back.
Russia denies it will invade and says diplomacy should continue. We report from Moscow and Kiev. Also tonight, one family's long quest for justice as the inquiry opens into how hundreds of post office managers were wrongfully convicted for theft. Undercover footage shared with BBC Panorama shows dairy cows being abused on a farm in Wales. The 15-year-old Russian sensation of the Winter Olympics is controversially allowed to continue competing despite failing a drugs test.
Ghostbusters.
Hey, anybody see a ghost?
And the man best known for movies such as Ghostbusters, Animal House and Twins, director Ivan Reitman, has died.
And coming up on the BBC News Channel, freestyle skiers Kirsty Muir and Katie Summerhays impress in the slopestyle in Beijing. They're into tomorrow's final as Britain search for a first medal.
Good evening and welcome to the BBC News at 6. The Prime Minister says the evidence is pretty clear that Russia plans to invade Ukraine, despite Russia's denials. The UK has joined Western nations to again make it clear to Moscow that any military action will result in sanctions that would have serious consequences for the Russian economy. Boris Johnson is due to speak to the US President Joe Biden this evening as around 130,000 Russian troops mass on Ukraine's border. Ukraine's president insists his country's ambition is still to join NATO despite Russia's opposition. Russia, for its part, has said diplomatic efforts to resolve the crisis should continue and even be stepped up. With more, here's our Eastern Europe correspondent Sarah Rainsford.
Talks to defuse this crisis have been intensifying. Today, the German Chancellor was in town, showing support for Kiev and seeking ways to get Russia to pull back its troops. President Zelensky made clear that wouldn't be by Ukraine dropping its right to join NATO, though, as his ambassador to the UK seemed to suggest in a BBC interview just yesterday. Germany's Chancellor is heading to Russia tomorrow.
I'm making it clear once again here in Kiev that Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity are non-negotiable for Germany. We therefore expect Russia to take clear steps to de-escalate the current tensions.
But Russia is still building up its forces, parading its potential near Ukraine's border. Britain believes an invasion could come within days.
We are on the edge of a precipice, but there is still time for President Putin to step back. And what we're urging is for everybody to engage in dialogue, for a conversation to take place, and for the Russians to avoid what I think everybody, certainly everybody in the UK, can see would be a disastrous mistake.
Though in Moscow, Russia's foreign minister was shown urging President Putin to keep talking to the West.
It can be hard to make a connection between all the politicians' warning of imminent all-out war, even the bombing of this city, Kiev, and how things actually feel here on the ground. Because even as the negotiations, the diplomacy continue, so does life here pretty much as normal. Although beneath the surface, people do say they're feeling increasingly nervous now.
What we have to say and what we have to do is to be in panic and being afraid every hour of our life. We don't want to live like that, and we just want to live. And
yeah, we are patient and ready for anything.
So we just hope that our city will be safe and our families will be safe.
For now, the musicians play on. Even the school trips haven't stopped, as Ukrainians still can't quite believe the worst predictions. Sarah Rainsford, BBC News, Kiev.
Well, President Putin has long made it clear that he considers Ukraine and Russia as one people linked by history. His desire to keep Ukraine within Russia's sphere of influence is threatened in part by Ukraine's desire to be part of NATO, a defence alliance of countries in Western Europe and America. Since the end of the Cold War, countries have applied to join NATO, expanding the organisation and pushing it eastward. Ukraine has long wanted to join NATO. But is Russia now preparing large-scale military action to ensure Ukraine will never be able to join the alliance? The West fears so. But what is the view from the Kremlin? Here's Steve Rosenberg.
Western leaders may be warning of an imminent Russian military escalation in Ukraine, but Moscow dismisses all of that as hype, hysteria. And if you look at the way the state media here has been covering the Ukraine story, you'll see that the picture presented to the Russian public is the polar opposite of how the West sees things. So, according to that Kremlin picture, Russia has no plans for an invasion. Instead, it's America who's the aggressor and pouring weapons into Ukraine. It's NATO that's threatening Russia by expanding eastwards. Still, that doesn't explain why Moscow is massing more than 100,000 troops right now near Ukraine's border, and why it's launched large-scale military exercises in the region. So what is Vladimir Putin's aim? That is a difficult question to answer because no one's quite sure. Some in the West think this is all about Russia trying to force Ukraine back into Moscow's orbit. Some believe the Kremlin's objective is much wider, to carve out a new sphere of influence for itself in Europe, basically to dismantle the post-Cold War European security order and to push NATO back. Today, with Moscow sensing a lack of unity in Europe, and perhaps feeling that America's too busy with problems at home, a resurgent Russia may feel that this is the moment to take action. But if there was all-out war with Ukraine, how would the Russian public react? It's hard to see the public here supporting a large-scale conflict with Ukraine. Many Russians have said to me that they see Ukrainians almost like brothers. There are very deep cultural and historical ties. War is the last thing that people want here. But it won't be the public that decides this. It'll be the president. So what happens next? Well, that may depend on whether President Putin is willing to compromise over Ukraine and European security, even if he doesn't get everything he wants, like an end to NATO enlargement eastwards. Whether he's willing to reach a deal or determined to continue with coercive diplomacy. Steve Rosenberg, BBC News, Moscow.
Our diplomatic correspondent James Landell is here. Yes, there appears to be a drumbeat towards war, and yet we hear President Putin and his foreign minister saying today diplomatic efforts should be continued, even ramped up. What are we to make of that?
Well, I mean, at face value, diplomacy continues. The Russians say they're willing to carry on talking about security. We know that the German Chancellor is there in Moscow tomorrow to meet Mr. Putin to discuss the crisis. So conversations carry on. But as you say, the mood music is grim. In the last few moments, the president of Ukraine, Mr. Zelensky, has issued a statement far more gloomy than previously. Before he said, look, let's not panic. He's now saying we're frightened of the Great War. The date of a military invasion is set again. We're told that's February the 16th, a couple of days' time. We will make that a day of unity. And if you also talk to Western officials, they say, look, no decision that has been made. It's not inevitable, but they say the window for diplomacy is closing. They think the decision is going to be made by Mr. Putin imminently. And they say, look, at the same time, Russian troops are increasing. They're getting closer to the border. They are configured for invasion, not for exercises. One said to me this afternoon, one source, this is a moment of great jeopardy.
James, thank you. The one immediate knock-on effect of the tensions over Ukraine is the rising cost of oil, which today has seen prices at UK petrol pumps reach a record high. Energy costs have been soaring already, and if the situation in Ukraine deteriorates, oil and gas supplies from Russia to Europe may be interrupted, pushing up wholesale prices still further. Our transport correspondent Katie Austin is in north-west London for us. Katie.
Yes, a resurgence in demand as economies around the world reopened is one of the factors that was already pushing up oil prices, and concerns around the potential for conflict in Ukraine have helped drive them further. The price of a barrel of oil reached a 7-year high before falling off a bit through the course of today, and in the past hour a barrel of oil cost between $94 and $95. Now, this all eventually feeds through to how much drivers here in the UK pay for their fuel at the pump. And already motoring groups say that the average cost of a litre of petrol has exceeded 148 pence, or £1.48, which is a record. And they say diesel has also hit a record high of 151 pence for a litre on average, or £1.51. The AA says that this is all adding to the cost of living crisis, and the RAC predicts further rises to come as retailers pass on those wholesale increases. It does come at a time where households and businesses are already facing cost pressures, with inflation high and hikes in energy bills and tax rises to come as well. For its part, the Petrol Retailers Association, which represents independent forecourts, says its members are doing what they can to keep prices as competitive as possible.
Katie Austin, thank you. A long-awaited public inquiry into the most widespread miscarriage of justice in legal history has started today. More than 700 post office branch managers were wrongly convicted and thousands lost their businesses when faulty accounting software called Horizon made it look as if money had gone missing from their tills. The inquiry will look at what the post office knew about faults in the IT system and why innocent staff were prosecuted. After 20 years, still no one has been held to account. Our Consumer Affairs correspondent Coletta Smith has more.
It's a big day for the Sethi family.
Of course, we are a bit nervous, but we are very happy that we have got an opportunity to put a case for the first time.
They're hoping for justice at last.
I want accountability, so I want someone to say, yes, something happened, we know it was wrong, these are the people that should be facing the justice, like my father said.
After 20 years of running post office branches, new software being rolled out across the country started showing mysterious holes in their account. The post office blamed them, like thousands of other sub-postmasters, closing the branch. The Sethis lost their business and their livelihood.
In the 40 or 50 years we have run the post office, what have we got to show? Nothing. We couldn't even get our children married. We couldn't look after them. We couldn't do anything for them. I feel a failure myself.
But today, for the first time, someone in authority is listening, as this inquiry tries to find out who is responsible for what happened.
The people who did this, they should be investigated. Not a single person has been brought to charge till today. They have gone scot-free, and their answer would be, sorry, they have left the organization or they retired. Yeah, but they are the people who did it. And this was not one person. This goes right till the top.
And Baljit's story is just the tip of the iceberg.
More than 700 people were convicted because of those faults in the IT system. Thousands of families right across the UK are still suffering the consequences of the actions the Post Office decided to take.
The indignity of having to have a shower in front of a prison warden.
Noel Thomas was charged with false accounting by the Post Office and spent his 60th birthday behind bars.
Were you able to contact your family while you were
there? During that time I wasn't allowed only out for my food.
Tracy Felstead was sent to prison at 19 and is still coming to terms with that pain.
I don't want to be that person who is scared of noises, who, you know, it broke my marriage down. It's taken its toll. No amount of money will ever change what's happened.
The Post Office have again apologised, but today the tables have begun to turn. Those who were once blamed are now asking for Post Office bosses to be held to account. Coletta Smith, BBC News.
The Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer has confirmed he's received death threats following Boris Johnson's false claim that he personally failed to prosecute the paedophile Jimmy Savile. Sir Keir had to be shielded by the police from an angry mob outside Parliament last week and says the Prime Minister's slur has fed into right-wing conspiracy theories. The police are investigating the online death threats. The 15-year-old Russian figure skater, whose performances have wowed judges at the Winter Olympics, will be able to continue competing despite a failed drugs test. Kamila Valieva's positive result in December only came to light last week after she'd helped Russia win the team skating event in Beijing. The Court of Arbitration for Sport said she could continue, in part because she's so young. But it's not the end of the matter, and there will be further investigations into Valieva and the Russian team. Laura Scott reports.
Cleared to skate, but not cleared of scandal. Kamila Valieva returned to the ice under the scrutiny of the world after the Court of Arbitration for Sport ruled the 15-year-old should be allowed to continue competing in Beijing, despite testing positive for a banned substance.
No provisional suspension should be imposed on the skater. In particular, the panel considered that preventing the athlete to compete at the Olympic Games would cause her irreparable harm.
The panel said a series of exceptional circumstances were behind its decision, including that Valieva is only 15 and the fact that her positive drugs test result came back midway through these games, 44 days after the sample was taken, meaning she had little time to mount a defence. The World Anti-Doping Agency said it was disappointed by the decision because its rules don't allow exceptions to be made to mandatory provisional suspensions, including for minors. Meanwhile, the US Olympic and Paralympic Committee said this appears to be another chapter in the systematic and pervasive disregard for clean sport by Russia.
It is damaging, it's very damaging, but at the same time you want to think that now maybe yet again we're at this point where something will be done in order to make sure that nothing like this can happen again.
The International Olympic Committee announced that there won't be a medal ceremony in the figure skating team event, which was won by the Russian Olympic Committee, including Valieva, and there are other ramifications too.
Should Ms Valieva finish amongst the top 3 competitors in the women's single skating competition, no flower ceremony and no medal ceremony will take place during the Olympic Winter Games, Beijing 2020.
Time has just gone 6:15. Our top story this evening. The Prime Minister warns the evidence is clear Russia plans to invade Ukraine despite Russia's denials. And still to come, the mother of Caroline Flack tells the BBC why she believes decisions by the police contributed to her daughter's death.
Coming up in Sports Day on the BBC News Channel, it's raining beer cans at the Phoenix Open in Arizona, with players bearing the brunt of more boisterous celebrations from the crowd on golf's PGA Tour event.
Holy cow. Careful, folks.
BBC Panorama has obtained footage showing cows being hit and kicked on a large dairy farm in Wales. It was filmed by an undercover worker who was sent there by the campaigning animal welfare charity Animal Equality. The farm concern says any workers found to have abused cows will be disciplined. Panorama reporter Daniel Foggo looks at the increasing pressures being put on cows to meet high milk demands. You may find some parts of his report disturbing.
Milk may be as popular as ever, but making money from it isn't easy. Margins are tight, and cows are under increasing pressure to be more productive. Amid growing welfare concerns, the campaigning charity Animal Equality sent an investigator to work undercover on a large dairy farm in Wales last year. They've shared their footage with Panorama. To make sense of it, I wanted to meet the man who filmed it. He asked us to disguise his identity.
What was the basic routine at the farm?
Well, I was general worker, assisted with milking and other tasks that are required on the farm.
He told me he had witnessed other workers mistreating cows on many occasions.
I've seen cows being kicked while they are down. I've seen a cow hit with a shovel in her face.
We showed the footage to an expert in animal welfare.
They're kicking that cow pretty hard at the moment. It's abuse, it's inhumane. This should not be occurring.
We also showed the Welsh farm footage to a barrister who has handled many animal abuse prosecutions.
Shouldn't stop like that.
Yeah.
So that's hitting a cow with a shovel?
Yes, quite clearly. That would constitute an offence. We would prosecute something like that. It's basically an assault against the animal.
We wrote to the owner of the Welsh farm. His lawyers told us If workers had punched and kicked animals, a disciplinary process would start immediately. They also said the farm continues to invest with particular regard to animal health and welfare. There are 12,000 dairy farmers in the UK. The industry says it has the highest animal welfare standards in the world. Panorama also saw footage of newborn calves being separated from their mothers. This industry-wide practice is done to maximise the milk available for human consumption.
This is the biggest issue that dairy farms globally are focusing on. Most farms will separate calves from cows within the first 24 to 48 hours. It's a very complex issue. As an industry, we recognise that this is something difficult for consumers to grapple with. Milk is far too cheap. Sometimes I look at the cows and think it's an insult to see it being sold at the rate that it is. Even just one extra penny on a litre will enable a farmer to upgrade or take advantage of new technology that's out there to make sure that the cows are getting the best care that they can.
The question is, would consumers be willing to pay for more expensive milk? Daniel Foggo, BBC News.
And you can see more of A Cow's Life, the true cost of milk, on BBC One tonight at 7:30 or at 10:35 in Wales. In the last half hour, Northern Ireland's Health Minister has announced that the remaining COVID restrictions will be lifted from tomorrow. The rules still in force include a requirement for nightclubs and some entertainment and sports venues to ask customers for proof of vaccination or a negative test. That will be scrapped, as will the requirement in law for people to wear face coverings in most indoor public places. The Duchess of Cornwall is self-isolating after testing positive for COVID-19. Her husband, the Prince of Wales, tested positive for the virus on Thursday, but Camilla carried out 3 public engagements that day after testing negative. It's the first time the Duchess has caught the virus, while Prince Charles now has it for a second time. The government is proposing to cap the costs faced by leaseholders who own flats with flammable cladding and other fire safety defects. Ministers say no leaseholder will have to pay more than £15,000 in London and £10,000 in the rest of the UK for costs related to the cladding crisis. Any money already paid out since the Grenfell fire will count towards the cap. Campaigners have welcomed the move, but say they still shouldn't be paying a penny for problems they didn't cause. An urgent search is underway for a dangerous sex offender who's escaped from an open prison in Boston in Lincolnshire. Paul Robson has been described as a particular danger to women and young children and could be anywhere in the country. Our correspondent Caroline Bilton is in Boston. What more can you tell us about this man, Caroline?
Well, he's been described as dangerous and a menace to women, and he has been on the run now for over 35 hours from this open prison here on the outskirts of Boston in Lincolnshire. He has a history of violent sex attacks, and we've just learned this evening that he was only sent here 3 weeks ago. He was jailed in 2000 for the attempted rape and the indecent assault of a woman at knife point, and Lincolnshire police have today said that he could cause a real harm to anyone that he comes across. They've also admitted that he could be anywhere in the country by now. He was believed to be wearing a grey jacket with orange on the shoulders, a woolen beanie hat and dark bottoms, and police are urging anyone to come forward with possible sightings. This is a minimal security prison. It's a Category D prison, but prisoners are checked and risk assessed before they're sent here. But questions are being asked tonight on how such a dangerous man, deemed by police as dangerous, could come to be housed in an open prison of this nature. Fiona.
Caroline Bilton, thank you. The mother of Caroline Flack has criticised the Metropolitan Police for their decision to charge her daughter with assault, which she believes contributed to her suicide 2 years ago. The BBC understands the police watchdog has now ordered the Met to investigate their decision to push for the prosecution of the presenter. Mrs. Flack claims the police treated her daughter differently because of her celebrity status. Tomorrow marks the 2nd anniversary of her death. Our special correspondent Lucy Manning reports.
Brand new series of Love Island. The wait is finally over.
Caroline Flack. We watched her on screen. But those who really knew her wanted answers about her death. 2 months before the TV presenter killed herself, she had been charged with assaulting her boyfriend. 2 years on, her mother still doesn't have the answers about the way the police treated her.
Do you think she was treated differently because of who she was?
Totally. I just think it was because who she was, yeah.
It was because of she was a celebrity?
Yeah, yeah.
Prosecutors originally said Caroline should just be cautioned, but the Met pushed for the presenter to be charged. The coroner later said she took her own life because she was facing prosecution and feared the publicity.
But it's now 2 years and I've still not got an answer.
And how does that leave you and the family?
It leaves us really, really sad and really angry because, you know, you want to know why they charged her. She couldn't get over that. She couldn't see a way out. And it was down to that.
Her mother put these questions to the Met. She was so dismayed with their response, she complained to the police watchdog. It found the Met's response was not reasonable and proportionate, telling Mrs. Flack, "I do not consider your complaint has been fully addressed." It's ordered the Met to do a proper investigation.
What do you think about the fact that the police watchdog have forced the Met to investigate your queries properly?
I think it's disgusting, but I think it's typical of the Met as we see it now. There's no trust at all. No trust at all.
The Met has said it is rare to give a caution in a case of domestic abuse. The force told us the police watchdog found it had answered 7 areas of Mrs. Flack's complaint, but it had been directed to reinvestigate why it had appealed the decision to caution Ms. Flack. Our thoughts and sympathies remain with Caroline's family, it said. But Mrs. Flack feels her daughter, who had self-harmed that night and had mental health issues, was badly let down.
She was fun. She just had these really dark times. As I say, usually she could get out of it, especially on telly. She loved her job. I'm doing it for Caroline because there was so much negative press around, and it won't bring her back. I know it won't bring her back, but I've got to do it for her.
Caroline Flack's mother, Christine, talking to our special correspondent, Lucy Manning there. The film director and producer Ivan Reitman, best known for the comedy Ghostbusters, has died. He was 75. He was behind many of the box office smashes of the 1980s and 90s, including Animal House, Twins and Kindergarten Cop. Born in what's now Slovakia, Reitman grew up in Canada, where he trained in filmmaking. Liza Mazimba looks back at his life.
The supernatural comedy was a phenomenon. Director Ivan Reitman knew exactly what audiences wanted when teenagers became cinema's most lucrative audience in the 1970s and 1980s.
He slimed me.
His first big success was producing the raucous National Lampoon's Animal House in 1977. The movie, about an out-of-control fraternity, incorporated some of Reitman's own experiences of college and helped begin audiences' tastes for gross-out comedy.
I'm a zit. Get it?
He turned to directing. His working relationship with Bill Murray, which reached its peak with Ghostbusters, began with Reitman directing him in films like Meatballs and Stripes.
Where the hell have you been, soldier? Training, sir! Training, sir! What kind of training, son? Army training, sir! Army training, sir!
He also developed a strong relationship with Arnold Schwarzenegger. Reitman cast him in Junior, Kindergarten Cop, and the action star's first comedy, Twins.
My name is Julius, and I'm your twin brother.
Oh, obviously. The moment I sat down, I thought I was looking into a mirror.
Have you missed us?
And last year, he produced the Ghostbusters sequel, Afterlife. He was a filmmaker who, over the decades, changed the course of cinema comedy forever.
I ain't afraid of no ghosts.
Ivan Reitman, who's died aged 75. Well, let's take a look at the weather now, shall we? Darren Bett is here, and it's all looking pretty stormy, Darren.
Yes, it is. We've got 2 named storms heading our way later this week, Fiona. Ahead of that, though, things are going to quieten down, actually, for a while overnight. The showers will fade away, the winds will ease, and we'll have some clearer skies. But there is some rain coming in from the west, maybe some snow into the Scottish mountains. And ahead of that, temperatures will be close to freezing for a while, tending to lift, though, later on in the night. This band of rain isn't going to hang around for much of the day. For many parts of the country, it moves away fairly quickly up towards the Northern Isles. The rain could linger into the afternoon across the far south of England, but otherwise sunshine follows, showers too. Those will be of a wintry flavour over higher parts of Scotland, and temperature wise those numbers very similar actually to what we had today. It does tend to cloud over in Northern Ireland later on, and we will see a spell of rain running quickly eastwards overnight. That moves away and more wet weather arrives across northern and western parts of the UK during Wednesday. The winds are starting to strengthen on Wednesday, and there are very mild southwesterly wind across southeastern parts of the UK. Temperatures could be up to a staggering 17 degrees for this time of the year. But the temperature's not the story, it's the strength of the wind. This is Storm Dudley. It arrives later on Wednesday night and into Thursday, racing across the north of Scotland. The squeeze of strongest winds will be to the south of the storm. And whilst it's windy in most places, this is where we've got the core of strongest winds overnight into Thursday morning. Could be gusting around 80 miles an hour, so some damage and disruption as well. Those winds will tend to ease down slowly during Thursday. Many places will be dry, some sunshine, a few showers around. Still some wet weather in Scotland, some rain and some snow to higher ground, and temperatures 7 to 12 degrees. The next storm arrives on Friday. Some uncertainty about the track of Storm Eunice. That will bring some windy weather widely on Friday. It could be a windier day actually for more of England and Wales. And further north, particularly in Scotland, there's likely to be some snow and blizzards. Fiona.
Darren, thanks very much. A reminder of our top story this evening. The Prime Minister warns the evidence is clear Russia plans to invade Ukraine, despite Russia's denials. That's all from the BBC News at 6. It's goodbye from me, and on BBC One, we can join the BBC's news teams where you are.